Welcome back to the Ripewave audio community. My name is John, and for this video, we are going to continue on our listening tests and comparison between the AV processor and AV receivers we recently acquired for the Ripewave audio home theater. And these are namely the Emotiva RMC-1 AV processor and the Marantz Cinema 50 AV receiver. And to these, we add a new element. Well, not really a new element because we're going back. We pulled out our Sony TA-E9000ES. This is the unit we're finally replacing after 20 years of service in our theater. And why haven't we changed this out? Obviously, technology has passed it by. It does not have any HDMI ports. It doesn't have any of the modern decoding formats. But still, the audio quality on this was very good. And I've been waiting for things to stabilize in the home theater world a little bit until we replaced it. I don't have a lot of money to spend on this stuff. And when I do spend it, I want to spend it wisely. So this stayed in our system for a long time. And I was always happy with the sound quality, as I said. So I think it makes sense to really know how much better these new units actually sound. And if they do sound better, that's the question. So how do we go about our tests? Now, with my engineering background, I do like to plan out, have a test plan, go about this. Now, I do adjust the test plan as I go, as I try to think of ways to make things more obvious and more fair and more apples to apples. And I don't like to have too many variables going at one time. I like to simplify it down. This is why, for one, we're not using the internal amplification of the Marantz receiver. We're using the same speakers and the same amplifiers for each channel. So when we're coming out with the front channels of the Emotiva, or the front channels of the Marantz, or even the front channels of the Sony, we're driving these things through the same Emotiva XPA1 monoblocks. I have 3 of them. Of course, for 2-channel comparisons, and again, this is the simplification, just listening in 2-channel mode, I just need the left and the right channels. And the other thing is my AB switch is really just a 2-channel AB switch. I wish they made maybe they do, a AB switch for like 16 home theater channels. Wouldn't that be nice? And I can just switch configurations that easily and keep the speakers and the amps the same through the whole process. So we're doing that. The other part of simplifying this down is to start with, not end with, but start with the rawest output. We know that a lot of these units, and they all go about things a little differently, can equalize, do room calibration. Of course, not the vintage one. Can't do room calibration. It did have an input for a test microphone, I think, which was never, yeah, there's an analyzer mic in, and I don't think it does anything more than, I don't know if they even set that up. It might have done some test tones for level matching, but it might have been an unutilized capability, something they were planning for back in 1998 when they designed it. But anyhow, the sound modes, like on the Sony, I'll take the equalizer. There's an equalization button that's turned off. I'll set it to 2-channel mode. There isn't a pure direct mode or direct mode for say. So what I do is I manually set the front speakers to large, and I turn off the subwoofers. I don't want to bring subwoofers into the equation. At this point, I'm not seeing how much better it can be, but for light conditions, the same front speakers, set at full range as large, this is the way I want to listen to it. So I set this to large. I take the subwoofers off. I hit the 2-channel button on here, so I don't have any of the Hall effects, anything going on. Likewise, I go into the Marantz and the Emotiva. Now, Marantz has several sound modes here. There's a stereo mode, and I think it plays the subwoofer if it is connected. So I probably don't want that. They do have a direct mode, and that plays the audio back as it was recorded, so it's not doing any colorization. And then they have a pure direct mode. So they call this even higher quality than direct. And it will turn off circuits to improve sound quality. It will even turn off the main display. So your unit didn't shut off, the main display just shuts off as part of that. So that's probably what I'll use on the Marantz. And then on the Emotiva, they have, yes, they also have a stereo 2-channel mode, but the subwoofer is still active there. And the loudness controls, the tone controls, trim controls are active. Dirac is active on that. And then I look at the direct mode, and the direct mode takes things down a little cleaner. They don't synthesize any extra channels. The bass management, if it's available, is still active. So you still have your subwoofer on the direct mode, but you can't use loudness controls, tone controls, and you can't use Dirac Live or the manual parametric EQ settings, but you can do your level trims. Finally, what Emotiva has is a reference stereo mode, and this is always 2-channel. There's no bass management. Nothing is sent to the subwoofer. You can't use loudness controls. You can't use tones or trims. It's pretty straight, that reference stereo mode. Speaker distances are active for digital sources, but not analog. Analog signals are passed straight to the volume control and outputs, which is really nice. Although I'm not going to be testing it with analog in this case. Digital inputs are converted to analog and sent to the volume control. And any surround sound is down mixed to 2-channel. So I think I want reference stereo, but what they say is you have to set your front speakers to large before that will show up. So that's what I did. I set them to large, and you will use reference mode. So this is our starting point as far as what we're bringing in. We're going to use the Apple TV and the streaming services for the music, and play a variety of different types. And we're going to feed that. The way this is set up is the Apple TV is plugged directly into the Marantz HDMI port. It then goes on the output HDMI up to the Emotiva. And then since the Sony is only analog, the analog output of the Emotiva is sent to the Sony, and we plugged it into the mini disc DAT port, just one of the analog inputs. And that way they get the same signal at the same time to all units. And then the front speaker outputs for the Marantz, the Emotiva, and the Sony are sent to our little bare ABC switch. And that switch has 2 balanced inputs and 1 unbalanced. Now the unbalanced I use for the Sony. The first balance one goes, or the first one goes to the Emotiva, which is natively XLR out, but the Marantz doesn't have any XLRs. So for that one, we come out the RCA, and I have a cable that goes from RCA to balanced. This little bear isn't going to care because it's a passive device. And so you're just not getting out any of the noise cancellation that might have been picked up in the line, but we're running short cables here. So that's that part of the test setup. The next thing I did was level matched. And this is really important because most people perceive louder sounds as better. So we don't want to be influenced by one of these sources or one of these units being louder than the other or softer than the other. I set this to around 85 dB. I'm noticing with the age of this Sony, I'm starting to get some noise up around 90 dB using the REW as a tone generator to put that level in. So to get a tone for all these to commonly set the level off of, because then we can't use the internal tones of all these, I don't think. By using an external tone generator, REW is a good one. I take my Moto Mark of the Unicorn M4 DAC, plug it into my laptop, REW, bring up the tone generator, and in this case, we are doing, for the tone generation, a pink noise, just like we're doing normally with REW. And then we're going to each source, setting it first to the Sony, bringing the volume up until it hits 85 dBs. Then go to the next one, turn up the Emotiva till it hits 85 dBs. And then likewise to the Marantz 85 dBs. Now we're doing this with it already set for pure direct or reference mode or whatever is the simplest mode, 2-channel, speaker set loud, no subwoofers for each of these. So we want to do the level matching after those are all set. At this point, you just put music in and enjoy, right? This is the fun part. So we've got the Apple TV playing. We're running through some content I'm familiar with. And I'm just, unfortunately, the only drawback on the Little Bear is it's a manual switch. I got to get out of my chair and move it. But when I move it, it is instantaneous. I don't have to move wires around. The more time that goes by from hearing one thing to the next, your memory gets lost. You can't, it's harder to remember what it sounded like. That's why this A/B switch is so beneficial in this comparison. So I went through this, and one of the first, and I'll use the first example I had, I put on Bosgag's album that is recorded well. It's one of those that streams at 192K, albeit the Apple TV is going to limit to 48. But at least it's equal. And I'm comparing these, and they sound relatively close with that album. And then I started switching to different records. And each album, each recording had different results, but consistently different. And I'll explain myself. One of the most pronounced differences was with two Fleetwood Mac albums, the Rumors one and the Mirage. And it wasn't that one processor or receiver sounded better when it normally doesn't. No, I think I could normally put these in the same order for the most part. I mean, the Emotiva, I'll just come right out, the Emotiva RMC-1 always sounds better or the same. In some cases, sounds a hair bit better, and at which point most people wouldn't care, that hair bit better. But with the Fleetwood Mac, Mirage, and Rumors albums, the difference is night and day. And this coincides with my first report. I just happened to hit content on that first report, the last video, that had this pronounced difference. And the Emotiva had just so much more there. Everything else is like. The only thing I'm changing is the record. and it can either seem the same, a little bit better, or a lot better. We're making no other changes. I'm not touching the volume knobs. Those were all level set. I leave them alone. And with certain records, it really stands out. Somebody asked if the Emotiva sounded harsh. I haven't got to the point where I found it was harsh. I did find that in all cases, the Marantz is more subdued, and even more subdued than the Sony TA. This is the surprising thing, is this Sony TA-E9000ES kind of was only slightly behind the Emotiva in some cases. And, well, the Fleetwood Mac one, it was further behind, but not as far as behind as the Marantz Cinema 50. Now, I continue to say the Marantz Cinema 50 does not sound bad. This is not a bad sounding receiver. I'm just here to come out and tell you there's differences, and those differences can be heard. Now, I did do a little playing around with REW and doing a sweep near field to the speaker using a UMIC-1 microphone with the calibration file, 90 degrees. And I'm going to probably run those again. I'm really not ready to do a full report on that. But I did notice that on the pure direct modes, those curves, whether I was listening to plugging in whatever processor receiver, were very close. They almost overlaid completely. There were some instances where you could see the bass being significant low when you get into the lower end, dropping off on the Marantz, which coincided with what I was hearing. And this is with a constant, consistent tone. This is not records changing. But I can't remember. I'll have to do that test again because I might have been not in pure direct mode. So I want to do that again. I bet when you're pure direct mode, that's all of them are gonna probably lay on top of each other fairly closely. But that doesn't explain why some records are more pronounced. So there's more work to be done on the scientific measurement side. I don't want to rely 100% of my subjective report back to you. I want to be able to show you some scientific data. So this is where I'm at now. The next part that I'm going to go through now is start adding in the spices. And so let's have each of these units put their best foot forward, okay? I typically don't listen in reference mode. I like having the room calibration. I like having some of those capabilities. I like the fact that with the Emotiva in low listening modes, I can hit a loudness button. And I'll tell you, that loudness button, that's something I always enjoyed on my dad's Marantz 2275 vintage receiver. It had it, and we used it all the time. I'd back off a little bit on the bass, jack the treble a little bit up with and that sounded great. And it sounds great on the Emotiva as well. It's things like that. I'm going to play with it. I'm going to play with the equalization curves in the Marantz. Let's see if I can get these as good as they can get using whatever tricks they have in their bag. Get them sounding where I think they're the best. Then compare them. That's going to be interesting. I'll give you some feedback right now. Is so far my experience is as you do those things, the Marantz falls further behind. But we'll see. I'm willing to correct myself. I want to give this a fair fight, and we'll see. So what is your feedback? I'd love to hear from you. I really like the engagement we're getting on this topic. We're getting a lot of write-ins, very thoughtful conversations. You're getting me to think. I'm putting things on my list to test, like the multi-EQ through the mobile app That was a great suggestion that came in. So what's your feedback? We'd like to hear from you. Put them on the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and be sure to hit the bell notification. And you can always hit that thanks button. That's good for a one-time donation. Of course, we have our Patreon at www.patreon.com/Ripewave. And in any case, keep evolving your audio experience.